The Ferrari sat like a wounded beast on the side of the coastal highway, its red paint gleaming under the afternoon sun while its engine lay silent and stubborn, refusing to roar back to life, and beside it stood Adrian Vale, a man whose name alone could move markets and bend boardrooms, now helplessly staring at the open hood as if money, power, and influence might suddenly learn how to turn a wrench. His tailored suit wrinkled, his phone dead, and his patience wearing thin, because for the first time in years there was no assistant to call, no driver to blame, and no shortcut to take. Only the humiliating truth that he was stranded alone and utterly powerless against a simple mechanical failure. And just as frustration tightened his chest, a small voice floated up behind him, soft as the wind, yet clear enough to slice through his anger. "My dad can fix it," the little girl whispered, and Adrian turned, startled, to see her standing there with dust on her shoes, sunlight in her hair, and a quiet confidence in her eyes that didn't belong to someone her age. She couldn't have been more than 8, maybe 9, holding a paper bag of groceries against her chest as if it were treasure, and behind her stretched a narrow dirt road, leading to a cluster of modest houses, far from the world Adrian knew, and he almost laughed, not out of cruelty but disbelief, because this man who owned half the skyline of the city was being offered help by a child who probably didn't even know what a Ferrari cost. Yet there was something in her gaze, something steady and sincere, that stopped him from brushing her off, and he cleared his throat, forcing a polite smile. "That's kind of you, sweetheart. But this isn't a toy car," and she tilted her head, unoffended, as if she had heard doubt her entire life and learned not to fear it. "I know," she said simply. "But my dad fixes things everyone else gives up on." And before Adrian could respond, she turned and began walking, glancing back only once, as if she already knew he would follow. And to his own surprise, he did, because when you've exhausted every option, sometimes the smallest voice becomes the loudest hope. And as they walked, Adrian noticed the world changing around him, the smooth asphalt giving way to cracked earth, the hum of traffic replaced by birds and distant hammers, and the little girl chatted as if they were old friends, telling him about her school, about how her dad smelled like oil and metal but hugged like home, about how things broke, a lot where they lived, but people fixed them because they had to. And with each word, Adrian felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him, a quiet discomfort mixed with curiosity, because no one in his world talked like this. No one spoke of fixing instead of replacing, of trying instead of throwing away. And when they reached the house, it wasn't really a house at all, but a patched-together structure of wood and tin, proud in its survival if not its appearance, and a man stood outside repairing a generator, his hands dark with grease, his posture calm, his eyes lifting as they approached. And the girl ran to him, smiling wide. "Dad, the car broke," she said, as if this explained everything. And the man wiped his hands on a rag, looking past her to Adrian, taking in the expensive watch, the scuffed shoes, the exhaustion behind the eyes. And there was no awe in his gaze, no recognition, just a simple nod. "Let's take a look," he said. And something about that tone, steady and unafraid, unsettled Adrian more than any boardroom challenge ever had, because this man wasn't impressed, wasn't intimidated, and didn't ask for anything in return. And as they walked back toward the Ferrari together, Adrian realized he hadn't even introduced himself. Hadn't needed to, because out here, stripped of titles and status, he was just another man with a broken machine and no idea how to fix it. And as the father leaned over the engine, listening, touching, understanding in a way Adrian never had, the little girl sat on a rock nearby, swinging her legs, watching them both, and she smiled, because she already knew something Adrian was only beginning to learn, that some people measure wealth in numbers, and others measure it in what their hands can repair. And as the engine coughed, sputtered, and finally fell silent again, the father didn't curse or give up. He simply nodded slowly, as if the car had told him its story. And in that moment, standing beside a stranger, in worn clothes while his $1 million car lay open like a confession, Adrian felt the first crack form in the armor he had spent a lifetime building, not from loss, but from humility. And if this story is already touching something inside you, if you feel that pull between pride and grace, between money and meaning, stay with us. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because this is only the beginning of a journey that will change everything. The father worked in silence, not the awkward kind that begged to be filled with small talk, but the focused, respectful quiet of a man, listening closely to a problem most people only glanced at before giving up, his fingers moving with care through the Ferraris, gleaming engine bay as if expensive. Metal and worn tools belonged to the same world, and Adrian watched, conflicted, because every instinct trained by years of wealth told him this scene was absurd, that a car designed by elite engineers in Italy could not be understood by a man who lived in a tin-roofed house at the edge of nowhere. Yet as minutes passed and the father's brow furrowed with concentration, rather than confusion, Adrian felt something heavier than doubt settle in his chest, a realization that knowledge did not always wear clean clothes. And when the man finally spoke, it was not to boast or demand payment, only to ask softly, how long since it last ran properly? And Adrian answered honestly, surprised at himself, admitting it had been weeks of small issues he'd ignored because there was always another car, another solution, another delay, and the father nodded as if neglect were a familiar enemy, then reached deeper, loosening a part that Adrian had never known existed, explaining calmly that machines